What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about the end of the original X Factor team. Let me explain. So in the mid-late 1980s, when it came to Marvel, they gave us another X title, which was X Factor, and fans loved it. It was the original X-Men coming back together to make a new team. Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, Angel. It was honestly amazing. But then, after a while, we began to see where X Factor was being pushed slowly back into the main X-Men team, especially when it came to 1991, where you had Marvel launch two different X-Men books, Uncanny X-Men and also X-Men. And so they said, we got to get X Factor back on the X-Men team. And so you had a few stories begin the process of just pushing them back on the X-Men team. And so today's full story video is going to show you those different stories where we see X Factor saying goodbye to their own team and rejoining the X-Men. I do hope you enjoy today's full story video. And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we're going to pick up first with Uncanny X-Men number 273. Now, this book alone is really more of a, I say, aftermath book for the extension agenda, because the big question is right now, where do our heroes go next after dealing with the whole extension agenda crossover? Now we see all our heroes currently looking at a computer screen, and they see all these different kinds of enemies out there they still got to handle, like the Hellfire Club, or the new Morlocks, or the Reavers, or Shadow King. Like the list goes on and on. And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering how to handle all these different kinds of situations. Now, for Cable, the best idea is to, well, go to war against them because they have the numbers. You have three different teams who can now come together to take down those different threats. Now, for Cyclops and Storm, they're not trying to go down a violent way to kind of bring down those different threats. They want to find a better solution. But that's the problem, though, for Cable. You see, for Cable, he's saying, you guys have been relying on Charles Xavier's dream for so long and been trying to do things in a peaceful way. But that's your problem, though, because with that peaceful way, you now have created three different teams who at first did not really work together at all. And now those three teams have also caused a lot of enemies across the world who are now trying to come after us and other mutants around the world as well. Like, can you really sit down and say that Charles' dream had actually worked out so far? But on top of that, you need a leader who's not scared to get their hands dirty. And of course, he's talking about himself, because right now Storm and Cyclops, they're kind of like, no, let's not go down this violent way. But for Cable, it unfortunately is the only way. Now, when it comes to Storm, Jean Grey, and also Cyclops, they are able to continue on with the conversation as Cable left the room. Now, for Storm, she kind of does believe that Cable might be right, that the best option to handle all these different kinds of problems is to go ahead and go to war against their enemies, because right now they have been doing things in Charles Xavier's ways. But the problem is, though, his ways had led to so many different problems popping up left and right over the years. And now they have three different teams. Now for Cyclops, he also does say, listen, if the New Mutants want to follow Cable, they can do that. And matter of fact, they can have the sub-basement of Charles Xavier School as their base, because all three teams can't stay there. It'll get too crowded. Now for Cyclops, he's saying, why don't we, X Factor and the X-Men, use our base, the ship, as a home for both teams? Now, this leads into Storm going into another problem. You see, there was a point where you had the world believing that the X-Men, the main team, was actually dead, but in reality, they were alive and they had a new base in Australia. And so for Storm, she's saying, in that period of time, we truly did felt like we were disconnected from the rest of the world. But here you are now, Cyclops, saying that my team and your team should live at your base, known as the ship. Now, when it comes to the ship, it actually is an aircraft. It is being controlled by an AI system that was created by the Celestials. But when it comes to the ship, it also has the ability to keep humans out and to only allow mutants in. And so for Storm, she's saying, but here we are again. We're going through another phase where we are going to be disconnected from the rest of the world. But on top of that, we are technically going against Charles Xavier's dream, because that man wanted both humans and mutants to live together. And now here you are saying that you have a ship where only mutants are allowed, not humans. How in the world is that okay? Now, we also got to do some build up for things to come down the road. So, for example, like Moira McTaggart. When it comes to Moira McTaggart, she has been acting a tad bit differently. Now, in her earlier videos, she was more aggressive towards other people, but apparently right now she's very passionate. And really, once you have Banshee being able to contact her, she is completely different than how she was acting in the earlier books. And so for Banshee, he's kind of wondering what in the world is going on with Moira McTaggart. Now, when it comes to Forge and Beast, they're trying to find a way to actually save Wolfbane. Let me explain. So back in the extension agenda, we had established that, well, Wolfbane was turned into a slave in Genosha. Now, when you are turned into a slave, you are completely brainwashed. You are forced to follow all their orders no matter what. But on top of that, you don't have the free will to think for yourself or do things for yourself. You are constantly being controlled by the higher-ups in Genosha. Now, for Wolfbane, as long as she stays in that human form, unfortunately, she'll be a slave for Genosha. But if she's able to be in her wolf form, she has the ability to think for herself. She has free will. But here's the problem though. She has a boyfriend, Richter, and she wants to be with him in her human form. But unfortunately, thanks to the process of being turned into a slave, she can't go back into her human form. And so for Beast and Forge, they're trying to find a cure for her to allow her to turn back to human. But the problem is, the longer they take, the chance they have gets smaller and smaller. Now, the big question right now is what to do with Gambit. You see, after a while, you do have Storm and Gambit being able to meet up with one another. And let's not forget that these two characters were able to build a bond with one another, because when Storm was turned back into a child, it was Gambit who looked after her, who protected her. And so they were able to build a bond with one another. But the question is, should he stay with the X-Men or should he leave and continue on to be a solo character? But you have Storm and Gambit kind of decide to work things out to allow him to stay with the X-Men. Now, I want to jump over to Psylocke and Jean Grey. Now, for Jean Grey, she has a big question. Hey, Psylocke, have you told your brother, Captain Britain, that you are alive? Because even though the X-Men had, made the world believe that they were dead, only a few people actually know that they are alive. And Excalibur, the fourth X-Men team, has no idea about the X-Men being alive. They were not part of the Extension Agenda crossover because they were in London. And so for Jean, she's kind of wondering, have you told your brother that you are alive? But Psylocke says no, because she's kind of wondering, How can she tell someone that she cares so much for that she was alive this entire time, while that man believed that she was dead? But also, let's not forget, the Hand had kidnapped her. They had brainwashed her and turned her into their true assassin. Now, even though she was able to break away, she still feels like that they might be able to bring her in. Now, I kind of want to shift our focus over to Gambit and Wolverine because you do have Gambit and Wolverine in the Danger Room. But really, this is Logan trying to figure out, can Gambit actually be a good fit for the team? Like, can they actually trust Gambit on the X-Men? Now, while you have the two characters in the Danger Room going back and forth, well, Jubilee is watching this fight. And for her, she is becoming very protective over Logan. Now, for me personally, it did kind of seem like this is Jubilee beginning to possibly fall in love with Logan. But at the same time, I don't want to say that. So I want to say that she's really protective over Logan because they have spent a lot of time together while, being gone from the rest of the X-Men. And really, they kind of did build a bond with one another. But either way, you do have Logan being able to, realize that Gambit will be a great fit for the team. Now, for Jean Grey, her main goal is to find, well, the lost members of the X-Men, because thanks to the Siege Perilous, you had the X-Men go their separate ways. Now, thanks to the extension agenda, most of the X-Men came back together. But you're still talking about the idea that there's still 3 members out there who have not been found. Rogue, Longshot, Dazzler. What are they up to? And so for Jean Grey, she wants to use Cerebro to hopefully find them. But the problem is, as soon as she does use Cerebro, well, she's then confronted by the Shadow King. Now, for the Shadow King, he's kind of like, hey, listen, I'm here to get revenge against you guys for what Charles Xavier did to me in the past. Now, for Jean, she cannot believe in the idea that the Shadow King is able to attack her mind while she is using Cerebro, because she thought that Charles put in some kind of blockers to protect people while they're using Cerebro. But the problem is, those blockers, they're outdated. And so unfortunately, the Shadow King is able to, get to her mind. Now, luckily for Jean Grey, Psylocke was nearby, and she was able to use her psychic knife to attack the mind of Jean Grey. Because of that attack, you didn't have Jean Grey lose connection with Cerebro, but also lose connection with the Shadow King as well to save Jean's life. Now you have Storm, Jean Grey, and also Cyclops meet up once again, and they're kind of wondering what to do next with all 3 teams, especially the X-Men, because at least the New Mutants are a team no matter what, and so is X-Factor. But the X-Men, they were just brought together again thanks to the extension agenda. But Storm gets her answer very quickly because you have all the members of the X-Men walk out in the classic X-Men outfits from the 1960s to kind of show that they want to be an X-Men. They want to be with Storm. And so because of that, we now have the X-Men team back together again. But as soon as the X-Men team came back together, well, they are confronted by Lila. Now, when it comes to Lila, we had talked about her before in our New Mutant videos. And really, she's a powerful teleporter, being able to travel across the universe. But apparently, Lila came over to the X-Men to say, hey guys, listen, I need your help. I need your help to save Charles Xavier. And so getting into today's video, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 274. Now, the opening page of this book alone does a great job in telling us what this story is going to be about. So in the opening page, we are told that there was an earthquake in South America. Now, when it came to this earthquake, we do kind of find out that it was not a natural earthquake. It seemed like something very big happened nearby to cause this very unnatural earthquake. Now, for most of the scientists across the world, they truly believe it has to be what's happening over in Antarctica. You see, over in that continent right now, 6 random towers have appeared around the entire continent. And so a lot of scientists believe that could be the reason why South America was affected. Now, for most of the scientists, they truly believe there must be something going on in the Savage Land. And so Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. are assigned to go into the Savage Land to figure out what is exactly going on there. Now, before we dive deeper into today's video, I kind of want to do a quick jump back over to Uncanny X-Men number 250, because that book alone really does establish everything we need to know for today's video, because this story arc is going to wrap up that story arc. You see, back in 250 for Uncanny X-Men, we were introduced to a character known as Zaladane. Now, when it comes to Zaladane, she used to be an assistant for another character known as the High Evolutionary. Now, they had worked together to bring back the Savage Land, which they were able to do. But after he left, well, then we saw her being able to build up an army in the Savage Land. Now, in that previous story arc, we were led to believe at first that her main goal was to, well, just take over the Savage Land. But this story arc says, no, that is completely wrong. She has some bigger plans in mind. Now, back in Uncanny X-Men number 250, we also saw her being able to kidnap Polaris and instill the powers of Polaris, the daughter of Magneto. Now, in that same book, she also told us that she was the sister to Polaris, but we never did get any kind of information to figure out how she is the sister to Polaris. Now, before the X-Men were actually able to take her down, well, they were forced to go back to their base, and that led into a bunch of different books where you had the X-Men dealing with different things. They couldn't go back to focus on Zaladane. And so that is why today's video is going to pick up where that story arc left off at. Now, Magneto, Rogue, and Kazar, they have been in the Savage Land, and so they have been trying their best to find a way to bring down Zaladane. But the problem is Rogue is not as powerful as she used to be. Now, when it comes to Rogue, she was going through a big change in the earlier story arc when you had the X-Men go through the Siege Perilous. Now, when it comes to the Siege Perilous, it has the ability to give you a new life, a new beginning. But the problem is you may forget everything about your past life, or you may remember everything, but like, hey, you now have a new life. Now, when it came to Rogue, when she went through the Siege Perilous, well, she also made a ghost of Carol Danvers. So that gets even crazier. You see, when it came to Rogue, over the years, she had touched so many people, and they were able to build personas in her own mind. And so when it came to Carol Danvers, she had her own version of herself inside the mind of Rogue, and it was the biggest persona. And so when Rogue went through the Siege Perilous, it gave her and also Carol Danvers a new life. But the problem was they were sharing the same life energy, and so sooner or later one of them would have to die, which of course it came down to Carol Danvers. But it was Magneto who had killed off Carol Danvers to give Rogue the ability to survive, but her powers have not come back all the way just yet. Now, when it comes to Magneto and also, Kazar and Rogue, they see that S.H.I.E.L.D. had made it to the Savage Land. But the problem is, their entire helicarrier or ship, whatever, had crashed in the middle of the Savage Land. And the reason why? Because of Zaladane. She had created some kind of EMP that's continuing to pulse across the entire Savage Land. And so all technology is just out for the count right now. And so when it came to S.H.I.E.L.D., when they had arrived, bam, they dropped very easily. Now, while you have our heroes seeing what happened to Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D., well, that is the moment they get attacked by the Savage Land mutates. Now, when it comes to the Savage Land mutates, they were actually created by Magneto. You see, when he first came over to the Savage Land, he realized that there was some high radiation in this area. And so he used that radiation on different people from different tribes across the Savage Land to give them abilities. Now, the problem is they now work for Zaladane, and she has sent them to go after Magneto, Rogue, and also Kazar. Now, Kazar can actually help out in this battle, but for Rogue, not very well, because again, her powers are not fully restored just yet. And so unfortunately, when she does try to help out and go after the big hitters, she's only getting in the way. Now, luckily for our heroes, Magneto is at full power, and so he was able to stop every single member of the mutates that came here to attack them. Now for Magneto, that's not enough. They should be all killed off for even trying to attack him, Rogue, and Kazar. And so he's about to kill off one of the members of the mutates. But you have Rogue being able to step in and say, no, we don't kill. And the thing is, you are not a bad person. You are a good person. Now, here's the thing. Around this point in Marvel Comics, this is a Magneto who's currently going through a transition back into the role of being a bad guy again. You see, for a while, when it came to Magneto, he was the leader of the X-Men, or really the leader of the school of Charles Xavier and taking care of the New Mutants, while Charles was away in space with Illyandra. And so for a while, Magneto did play a role as a good guy, but over time he realized that role is not for him at all. And so slowly he began to go back to his old ways again. And so for Rogue, it's kind of like, yes, I know that you have gone through some changes, but for my sake and hoping in the future, you'll go back into the role of a good guy. Now, this is also establishing that there is something between these two characters that is slowly building up right now. Now, I kind of want to continue on with the whole idea of Rogue and also Magneto, because this is the man who's having a hard time trying to figure out what is the right move for him right now, because this is the man want to make sure that he stays a good guy in the eyes of Rogue. Because the thing is, his main goal is to take down Zaladane. His main goal is to also take care of the mutant race. But the problem is the ways he wants to achieve those goals that could make him a bad person. And he knows if he goes down that road, most likely he is going to lose Rogue, and he does not want to do that at all. But the problem is, when he sees Rogue, is him saying, I want to be a better person. But when he sees Zaladane, he kind of realizes what he has to do to make sure that Rogue is protected, but also the Savage Land and the mutant race. Like, he knows what he has to do, and that means killing her off. But also, this man has nightmares of his past every single time he goes to sleep. Every single person he lost over the years in his past life, he's had nightmares over and over again. And so for him, it makes it even harder to decide what's right here, to be a bad guy or be a good guy for the sake of one woman. Now, you do have Zaladane go ahead and attack the base of Magneto. Now, for Eric, this is the perfect time to finally get rid of her, to finally save the Savage Land. And so while you have Magneto fighting against her army, well, then Zaladane appeared right behind Magneto. Now, this is the moment where Magneto finds out that Zaladane has the powers of Polaris, but also he realized that she's using the powers of Polaris in a way that he would never do. And the reason why? Because right now they are near a geomagnetic pole. And so the way she's using the powers right now could have some serious effect on the Earth. But right now, Zaladane does not care. Her main goal is to take down Magneto, which she is able to do. And so we're left to believe that she had just killed off Magneto in a matter of seconds. And so technically that leaves now Rogue and Kazar on their own to fight against the army of Zaladane, which honestly is not going to be a fair battle. But luckily for Rogue and Kazar, well, Nick Fury arrived with his group of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to kind of help out to bring down the people who were attacking Rogue and Kazar. And so now they're able to regroup somewhere else in the Savage Land. Now, once they do regroup, we do learn that for Nick Fury's group, some of the people in his group, they are actually Russian soldiers. And one of them, his name is Yuri. Now, for Yuri, he's going to be important for this section and the rest of the book. And the reason why, because Yuri does not like Magneto at all. And really, once you have Magneto come back to reveal that he has survived the attack of Zaladane, that is the moment we find out that Yuri does not like Magneto at all, because Magneto had killed off Yuri's son. You see, there was a Russian submarine that tried to attack Magneto in the past. Homeboy did not like that at all, and so that submarine has sunk to the bottom of the ocean, killing off everyone inside of it. And so Yuri's son was in that submarine that Magneto had sunk. And so ever since that day, Yuri always wanted revenge against Magneto. Now, for Magneto, he does not like Russia at all, because in his past, he had another child that was killed off by some countrymen in Russia. And so because of that, there's been bad blood between Russia and Magneto for a while now. Now, when it comes to Magneto, he does tell Nick Fury and the rest of his group that what Zaladane is trying to do. She is trying to connect herself to the magnetic field of the Earth and trying to drain the energy from that field to make herself stronger, which could do some severe damage to the entire planet. Now, you do have Rogue being able to talk to Magneto to convince him to work with Nick Fury, even though he does have some Russian soldiers. Now, I want to check back in with the X-Men, and the reason why, because in our last video, the X-Men had traveled across the universe thanks to a mutant known as Lila. Now, when it comes to Lila, we had talked about her before in our New Mutant videos. When it comes to Lila, she has the ability to teleport almost anywhere in the universe, and so she reappeared in front of the X-Men saying, hey guys, listen, I need your help. And the reason why, because Charles Xavier needs your help. And of course, you had the X-Men agree to go help out Charles Xavier. And so they traveled across the universe. But once they did arrive at that location, well, they were ambushed by some kind of creature. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they do try to use their abilities as a way to bring the creature down. But that's the problem though. This creature is just way too powerful for our heroes to stop. Now, we come to find out that Lila did not really set our heroes up for a trap. It seemed like someone had put the coordinates in her head, knowing that she'll bring the X-Men right over here to this location. And that person would be Deathbird. Now, when it comes to Deathbird, she is the evil sister to Illyandra, and almost every single time she appears, her main goal is to take over the throne of the Shi'ar Empire. And so right now we see that she has supposedly brought the X-Men here to help her out to slay Charles Xavier. And so as we dive into Uncanny X-Men number 275, a huge landmark issue, we do see that by this point in Marvel Comics, Illyandra is no longer in charge of the Shi'ar Empire. Instead, it now belongs to Deathbird, her evil sister. Now, when it comes to Deathbird, she was hoping to use the X-Men to slay, well, Charles Xavier, like I said earlier. But while you have Deathbird informing the X-Men what she wants from them, well, that is when her actual ship is being attacked by the Starjammers. Now, the Starjammers are usually known like this random pirate group out there, but they also being led by a character known as Corsair. Now, Corsair is the father to Cyclops and Havoc, and so when he does appear, him and the Starjammers are trying to bring down Deathbird alongside with some kind of new warlord that they are working for, and they're hoping to bring down Deathbird and return the Empire into Illiandra's hands. Now, with all that being said though, you didn't have the X-Men try to break free from the control of this monster, but this monster is under Deathbird's control. Now, thanks to Jubilee, she was able to free Wolverine, which then led Wolverine trying to bring down Deathbird. Now, Deathbird is not really an easy opponent. Like, she is somebody who can give you an actual challenge. And so for Wolverine, he's having that challenge right now, trying to bring her down. But unfortunately, he does lose the battle. And it does get to the point where she does stab him through the chest with her spear. Now, for Jubilee, she kind of forgets that Wolverine has a healing factor, or she has no idea how strong his healing factor truly is, because once he does get stabbed, she truly believes that Logan is dead. And Deathbird does walk away, but as soon as she walks away, Logan gets right back up again to show that he is perfectly okay. And he tells Jubilee, I need you to free the others while I go after her. Now, once you have the X-Men being able to break away from the monster, you then have Storm be confronted by Lilandra. Now, Lilandra is, or she was, the ruler of the Shi'ar Empire, but she's also the girlfriend of Charles Xavier. But like I said, she was the ruler of the Empire, but she lost that role to Deathbird. And so her goal right now is to reclaim what she lost, to get back the throne. And so that is why she had teamed up with the Starjammers. And there are a few soldiers of the Empire who were very loyal to her and who are right now trying to help her reclaim her throne. And so you do have Lilandra as Storm to help out, and the rest of the X-Men as well, which they do. But there is something else I do want to mention: the Imperial Guards. Now, the Imperial Guards are usually the high-ranking officers who protect the throne, protect the ruler of the throne. And so right now, with Deathbird being the ruler, she has some members of the Imperial Guard. Now, some of them did leave to go be loyal to Illiandra, but some are just so loyal to the throne, they said, hey, even though Deathbird is now in charge, I still have to protect her. Either way, you do have both sides fighting against each other, but our side does win. Matter of fact, you have Wolverine helping out by going after Deathbird, and really, he was able to get the jump on her. And so really, our heroes were able to clear out the entire ship very easily. Now, when it comes to the X-Men, they realize that somebody is missing, and that somebody would be, well, Charles Xavier. Because by this point in Marvel Comics, Charles had left the X-Men and the New Mutants behind to be with Lilandra. And the question is, if he left us behind, where is he? Well, let's not forget that there was a warlord earlier who was helping out the Starjammers. That warlord was Charles Xavier. Once he does take off his helmet to reveal that it is him, you have everybody celebrate. Except, well, the X-Men had changed a lot since the last time he saw them. You have some new members like Forge, Gambit, Jubilee, and Psylocke. And so they're kind of like, so this is Charles Xavier. He's kind of like, I see the X-Men had truly changed since I've been gone. I see we have some new members. Now, I want to shift our focus back over to the Magneto plotline, because you do have Magneto, Rogue, Kazar, and also Nick Fury and his soldiers heading over to the base that belongs to Zaladane. Now, I want to focus on Yuri because earlier we saw that Yuri really does hate Magneto because Magneto did kill off his son a while back. And so for Yuri, this man wants revenge so bad. And even though they're on a mission right now, heading over to the base of Zaladane, he wants to go ahead and take out Magneto right now to get revenge for his son. Now, when he does take out Magneto, he also takes out another helicopter that was holding a bunch of soldiers. But he does not care because to him, he was able to shoot down the man who had basically killed his son. But also, when he did that, well, it told the forces of Zaladane where to find Nick Fury and his army. And so they all got overrun by the army of Zaladane, thanks to Yuri. Now, for Magneto, unfortunately, he does become a prisoner for Zaladane. Now, when it comes to Yuri, he was also taken in by Zaladane, but he does become a boy toy for her because what he did for her is honestly great in her mind. Like, you took down Magneto, and now I am able to take away his powers. Aren't you amazing? And so she's going to keep him around because she's also attracted to him, but at the same time, she's very grateful for what he has done for her. And so we do see her being able to take away the powers of Magneto, and she already has the powers of Polaris. So now with the powers of Polaris and Magneto in her hands, she has become truly powerful enough to do a lot of damage across the world, and almost anybody most likely can't stop her. Now, the idea of Magneto not having his powers doesn't really last that long as I thought it would. And honestly, I felt like it should have lasted a tad bit longer. But either way, you do have Rogue, Khazar, and Nick Fury being able to actually attack the base of Zaladane. Now, while doing that, this is the moment where you have Rogue being able to regain all of her abilities. She's no longer in that weaker state. And so with her powers being back, she is able to do some serious damage to the army of Zaladane, but also the base of Zaladane. Now, while you had Rogue, Nick Fury, and Khazar fighting against her, you have Magneto being able to slip back into the machine and regain his powers back just like that. Now, you do have Yuri try to hold Magneto at gunpoint, which honestly does not work out very well for him because you didn't have Magneto easily kill him off just like that. But then you have our guy shift his focus over to Zaladane. Now, like I said earlier, to Magneto, he feels like the best option to take care of her is to go ahead and kill her off. And so when you have Nick Fury being able to bring down all the towers that were kind of amplifying her powers, she's now back to a lower level, a level where Magneto can easily take her out. Now, when it comes to Rogue, she knows what Magneto wants to do. She knows that Magneto wants to kill off Zaladane. But once again, you have Rogue believe that she might be able to talk him down from the idea of killing her off. But unfortunately, to Magneto, Zaladane has to go. It's the only solution to make sure that everything is going to be okay once they leave the Savage Land. And so just like that, she dies. And we don't see her ever again in Marvel Comics from my knowledge. And so then you have Magneto tell Rogue, you want to leave her base right now before I bring down the entire building. Now, I want to jump back over to the whole Charles Xavier and the Shi'ar Empire plotline. And here's the reason why. So when it comes to the actual plotline, we do see that Illyandra is able to regain control of the Empire. And we see her celebrating with the X-Men and her people in the idea that she was able to regain control of the entire Empire. But then out of nowhere, we see different characters being taken out left and right by an unknown force. But then the last page, the very last page, we see Gladiator, we see Oracle being forced to kneel down in front of Charles Xavier, kind of hinting at the idea that this man is no longer a good guy, that he's not a bad guy, and he got some big plans coming down the road. And he's not afraid of anybody trying to stop him, especially the X-Men, because he was their mentor. There's no way that he'll be able to lose against them. But this Okay, so getting back into our coverage over the X-Men, we do pick up with Uncanny X-Men number 276. Now, the opening pages of this book reminds us what happened in the previous story arc. You see, back in Uncanny X-Men number 275, we saw the X-Men having to team up with the Starjammers and Charles Xavier to help out Illyandra, because by this point in Marvel Comics, she had lost control of the Empire, the Shi'ar Empire. By this point in Marvel Comics, Deathbird had taken over the Empire. Now, luckily for Illyandra, the X-Men were able to help her to regain control of the Empire. But here comes the big problem, though. You see, while you had everybody celebrating and having a good time, well, out of nowhere, different members of each team began to just get taken out left and right, and no one knew what exactly was going on. But at the very end of the book, we saw Gladiator and also Oracle try to take down Charles Xavier, but he was able to take over their minds, and so now they're under his control. But it seemed like this man is not done yet. It really seemed like Charles Xavier has turned evil, and apparently he has some big plans coming very soon. So as we dive into Uncanny X-Men number 276, we do pick up with Charles Xavier telling Gladiator to just do some crazy things to Deathbird. Now, at first, it does seem like they're going to kill her off, but they want to torture her for a tad bit. And so we see Gladiator being able to rip off her wings. And you're kind of like, dang, Charles Xavier, like what in the world is going on with you? But it does get to the point where we actually see Gladiator about to kill off Deathbird. Now, no one else is in the room to see this except for Gambit and Jubilee. And so right when you see Gladiator about to kill off Deathbird, that is when you have Gambit realize that he has seen enough and he has to help her out. Now, we already know, when it comes to Gambit, this man does not have the ability to bring down a character like Gladiator, because Gladiator is one of the many versions of Superman in Marvel Comics. Like, this man has the ability to bring down Gambit without any kind of struggle, but for the sake of the story, we do see Gambit being able to hold his own. Now, when it comes to Deathbird, she is able to rejoin the battle and actually do some damage to Charles Xavier, but in the middle of the battle, she is grabbed by Gladiator and thrown through a wall. Now, on the other side of that wall is Lila. Now, we have talked about her before. When it comes to Lila, she has the ability to teleport across the universe. In our last video, we saw her take the X-Men across the universe to supposedly save Charles Xavier, except when they had arrived at that location, they were confronted by Deathbird, who said, actually, I brought you guys here to kill off Charles Xavier. Now, right now, it seems like Deathbird's plan is not really a bad plan, because it seems like Charles Xavier has turned evil. Now, when it comes to Lila, she does grab Deathbird and they leave Gambit and Jubilee behind as they teleport away. But when it comes to Gambit and Jubilee powers, they do cause a huge explosion. Now, with that kind of explosion, you do have the rest of the X-Men run into the room to figure out what exactly happened. Now, when they do arrive, they see that Gladiator is protecting Charles Xavier, and apparently Deathbird had tried to attack Charles, is what they tell everyone else in the room. Now, they also realize that Gambit and Jubilee are no longer in the room, but their powers were used to cause that explosion. So what happened to Gambit and Jubilee? Now, everyone is somewhat relieved to see that Charles is okay, but you didn't have Wolverine begin to sniff around the room, and he realized that there's something off with Charles Xavier. Now, unfortunately, this is not Wolverine telling the rest of the X-Men like, hey, that's not Charles. Instead, you have Wolverine just go ahead and just kill off Charles Xavier. Yes, you heard that right. He kills off Charles Xavier. Now, right after you had Wolverine do that, you didn't have Psylocke come behind Wolverine to use her psychic knife on the mind of Logan to just completely shut him down. Now you would think, okay, they now have time to breathe. No, they don't. Because then you have Deathbird and also Lila reappear. Except when they do, they brought some heavy weapons with them. And they cause another explosion in the room. Now, after the explosion, you then have Lila being able to use her powers once again to grab most of the X-Men herself and also Deathbird to teleport away. Now, the reason why I said most of the X-Men because, well, Psylocke does not go with them at all. She gets left behind. And you have Storm wondering, why in the world are you leaving her behind? But also, we still have no idea what happened to Gambit, what happened to Jubilee. Now, for Illyandra, she's so heartbroken about the idea that the man she loved is no longer around, that he is completely gone. Now, you do have Lord Chamberlain, who kind of works very close to Illyandra, send her away so that he is able to deal with the body of Charles Xavier correctly. Now, I said it correctly because he tells her that, like, hey, you know what? Go ahead and leave, get some space, take the time to realize the man you love is gone. I'm gonna take care of the body. But he completely destroys the body, leaving nothing behind except ashes. And then he grabs the leader of the Starjammers, Corsair, and says, go find the X-Men now. Go find Deathbird and go find Lila and bring them back over here. And so you have Corsair and the Starjammers leave. Now let's not forget that Corsair is the father to Cyclops and Havoc. Now we do see that the X-Men, Deathbird, and Lila were teleported over to a nearby planet. Now the reason why Deathbird and Lila brought the X-Men to this world is to show them what happened to this world. It's completely wrecked. There's no one alive at all except our heroes and Deathbird. And the reason why? Because of Charles Xavier. Now, for our X-Men, they cannot believe in the idea that that Charles Xavier actually did this. But you have Deathbird say, no, that is the reason why I brought you here for. You see, as I was the ruler of the Sheet Art Empire, I began to hear about different attacks across the universe on different worlds, and those worlds were being wiped out completely. But the people who were killing off all these different worlds kept saying they were doing it in my name. But the problem is, I was not involved in those schemes. But the problem was, the Empire began to believe it was Deathbird who was involved in all those attacks, because for a long time, she was a bad guy in Marvel Comics, so it only makes sense that she would do something like this. And so you have Deathbird say she figured out it was Charles Xavier, but she realized it couldn't be the Charles Xavier that she knew, that it's somebody else pretending to be him and acting this way as a way to frame him, but to also get rid of me, but to also bring back Illyandra. But they also have other plans also, but the problem is, we have no idea what those other plans are. And so for the X-Men, as they walk around this world, they see that, yeah, it's completely wrecked because of this fake Charles Xavier. And they realize that they have no choice but to work with Deathbird. The only ones who are with Deathbird and Lila is Storm, Forge, and Banshee. When it comes to Psylocke, Jubilee, Gambit, and Wolverine, well, they're with the Imperial Guards. Now, the Starjammers, they are able to find Deathbird, Lila, and the rest of the X-Men who are with them. But in the middle of that battle right there, you have Deathbird just freak out, and she says, we have to leave. She grabs Lila, and those two teleport away, leaving Storm, Banshee, and also Forge to fight against the Starjammers on their own. But I want to jump over to Illiandra's spaceship, and here is the reason why. So far we have seen that Charles Xavier was acting weird earlier before being killed off by Wolverine. But now we're seeing Psylocke currently using her abilities to control the mind of Jubilee and Illiandra. So now we know that even Psylocke is not acting normal like she usually does. Something is off. And the reason why? Because the Charles we saw earlier and the Psylocke we see now are actually Skrulls. Yes, you heard that right, Skrulls, who broke away from their empire, and their main goal is to take over the Shi'ar Empire. And the best way to do that is to control Lilandra. And so what they did was they went around kidnapping different people who were close to her, like Charles Xavier, Psylocke, the Starjammers. And once they were able to kidnap those people, they then used their shapeshift abilities to replace them and pretend to be those people. And so when it comes to Psylocke, this is not our Psylocke. She's currently tied up in some kind of web matrix alongside with Wolverine and also Jubilee. Now things get even crazier because the leader of this group of Skrulls then changed his body into Charles Xavier because Lilandra has to believe that Charles is alive. And so to make sure that he is alive, this Skrull has to pretend to be Charles Xavier, but to also use the powers of Charles to control her mind as she regains control of the Empire. And so in the eyes of the people of the Shi'ar Empire, Lilandra is in control, but in reality, it's going to be this Skrull pretending to be Charles Xavier. But as we jump into Uncanny X-Men number 277, we actually do pick up with Storm, Banshee, and Forge trying to fight against the Starjammers. Now, as the battle goes on, they don't realize that Gambit is on their ship. And so while you have the Starjammers trying to bring down our heroes, Gambit is able to pull off a surprise attack. And the battle does go on for a few more pages, but unfortunately at the end of the battle, we're kind of left to believe that Storm, Forge, Gambit, and also Banshee have completely lost against the Starjammers, who are really Skrulls pretending to be the Starjammers. Now, when it comes to Lila and Deathbird, they are able to sneak back onto the ship of Lilandra. But the problem is that as soon as they get back on the ship, they are then confronted by the Skrulls, who are pretending to be the characters we all know so very well and love. And so now you have Deathbird and Lila trying to fight against them. Now, in the middle of the battle, the real Charles Xavier, who is currently tied up right now, is able to use his powers to tell Lila, hey, go there and then bring these folks here to help you out. And so in the middle of the battle, she disappears, but then she comes right back with some reinforcements, and we kind of find out the Starjammers had lost the battle against Storm, Banshee, Forge, and Gambit, but now Deathbird can work alongside with them to bring down the Skrulls. Now, this is where we see the story begin to wrap up very quickly. So let me explain. So you do have the X-Men being able to fight against the Skrulls that were pretending to be our heroes. And while the battle goes on, our heroes are winning, taking down each and every single one of them, except it all comes down to the last Skrull, and that will be the one that's pretending to be Charles Xavier. And he is able to use the abilities of Charles Xavier to knock out the entire team. And so it looks like our heroes did all that work for nothing. But while the battle was going on, the web matrix that was holding up the real version of our heroes, well, that got damaged, being able to free Charles Xavier. And because Charles can walk right now, he walks right behind the fake Skrull pretending to be him and just knocks him out. Just like that. One good punch in the face and the day is saved. Now the story does get wrapped up very quickly, and let me explain how. So you do have Charles Xavier tell the real Starjammers to help out Lilandra to go through the Empire to make sure that there's not any more Skrulls out there pretending to be other people part of the Empire. Now you also have Charles Xavier read the mind of Storm. Now when he does that, that is the moment he learns what's happening back on Earth at the moment. The idea that, well, the Shadow King is back, and the Shadow King is doing a lot of damage to all the members of the X family. And so for Charles, he has to go back home. And so technically, this does lead into a story arc called the Muir Island Saga, but before we can cover that crossover, we have to cover another crossover, and that's one called Kings of Pain. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now it's time for us to dive into another X-Men crossover, better known as Kings of Pain. Now, Kings of Pain took place in some of the X titles annuals around this time in Marvel Comics, plus a New Warriors annual as well. Now, with that being said, this crossover is bringing back a certain character that we have not seen in a very long time, and I am talking about the idea of the early days of Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men, the real early days on his run on the X-Men. Now, with that being said, when it comes to this character coming back, they're trying to do something new and different with the character. But something else I do want to mention is that this is not the New Mutant team that you all know and love, because around this time in Marvel Comics, they were doing a transition from New Mutants over to X-Force. And so even though the first chapter is a New Mutants annual, well, they're calling themselves X-Force by this point in Marvel Comics. But they're the first team that we're going to see in this crossover. And so getting into the first chapter for today's video, we do pick up with New Mutants Annual number 7, where we actually pick up with a team better known as the Alliance of Evil. Now, the Alliance of Evil actually used to work for Apocalypse in the early days of X-Factor Comics, and we have not seen these characters for a good while now, but these characters are right now attacking a school better known as St. Simon Academy. Now, this school is somewhat important because at this school there are two mutants known as Artie and Leech who used to live with X-Factor in the early days of X-Factor Comics. You see, when it came to X-Factor, they were going around trying to find different mutants who may need their help to learn more about their abilities or to learn how to control their abilities. And so after a while, when it came to X-Factor, they realized that even though they are able to give these kids some kind of skills with their powers, these kids still need an education. And so unfortunately, when it came to Artie and Leech, they were sent over to this school right here to get that education. Now, when it came to Artie and Leech, they met another kid known as Whiz Kid. And all three characters, plus the rest of the kids that X-Factor has saved over the years, had formed a new team called the X-Terminators. Now, the X-Terminators was Marvel trying to have another young team of mutants out there. Unfortunately, it didn't last that long because right after you had the X-Terminators appear, they went away very quickly and most of the team went to go join the New Mutants. And so when it comes to Artie, Leech, and also WizKid, they were left behind at this school. Now, all three kids, they truly believe they have the ability to stop the Alliance of Evil. Yeah, I'm gonna tell you right now, they are completely wrong. Now, there are two other characters with the Alliance of Evil who are new to Marvel Comics. One being Harness and the other one being Piecemeal. Now, when it comes to Harness, their name gives it away very quickly. They have the ability to put someone in a harness. But for Piecemeal, well, he's a tad bit different. You see, what they're doing right now, they're going to different locations to collect a certain kind of energy. And Piecemeal is being used to store that certain kind of energy inside of him. Now, Piecemeal is just a kid, but unfortunately, he's being forced to do this. And so when you have Harness and Piecemeal arrive at the academy, well, he goes ahead and absorb this certain kind of energy. And once they got that energy, they're like, hey, time to leave, let's go. Now, before they do leave, you have Tower, one of the members of the Alliance of Evil, knock out WizKid, Leech, and Artie before they left. And so they move on to the next location. Now, once you have WizKid wake back up, he's in the medical room, but then he realized that Boom Boom and Cannonball are there because when it came to the Exterminators, they used to work alongside with the New Mutants, so he knows them very well, except when he looks around the room, he realized that Cannonball and Boom Boom are not with the usual New Mutants team. And he's kind of like, what in the world is going on here? Because like I said earlier, around this time in Marvel Comics, Marvel was moving away from the New Mutants and going into X-Force. And so you have Boom Boom and Cannonball say, hey, the team you knew are long gone. Meet our new team, X-Force, and meet our new team members like Feral, Warpath, Cable, Shatterstar, and also Domino. We're X-Force. But after you have Boom Boom and Cannonball being able to introduce everyone to WizKid, it's Cable saying, okay, cool, listen, kid, talk right now. We need to know what in the world is going on. You see, when it comes to X-Force, they have been trying their best to chase down the Alliance of Evil. But the problem is, every single time they arrive at what could be the next location the Alliance is going to attack at, they're a tad bit too late. When they arrive, the Alliance had already left, like the Academy earlier. And so for Cable, he's kind of wondering, what is the Alliance truly after? Now for our heroes, they know a lot of information about most of the Alliance, but not the two newest members, Harness and Piecemeal. And the big question is right now, who are they? But also, what is the Alliance truly after? And so now we have to jump over to Gentech. Now, Gentech is a company, one of the two companies that is going to be really important in this crossover. So when it comes to Gentech, they were hired by a mysterious employer to create a certain kind of genetic material. The problem is, though, they got word that the Alliance of Evil is going around the world to different locations to absorb that same kind of genetic material. So the energy we saw earlier when it came to Piecemeal, well, actually it was not energy. It was some kind of genetic material that was nearby the Academy that he had collected. The same kind this company is also trying to create. And so right now you have the higher ups believing that, hey, what if our employer has somehow also hired the Alliance of Evil? But at the same time, they don't want to believe that. But then we pick up with another company known as IDIC. Now, IDIC is actually a company who had hired the Alliance of Evil to go around and collect that certain kind of genetic material. But they're also working on their own project as well, a containment casing to put all that material inside of it. But the question is right now, what is their end goal though? And so now we have to jump over to Niagara Falls. Now, when we do, we see the Alliance of Evil once again there, but this time they're doing crowd control to push everybody back to allow Harness and Piecemeal to be able to collect another piece of that genetic material. Except right after you have Piecemeal being able to collect that small piece of material, well, that is when you have X-Force arrive. Now, when X-Force does arrive, they are able to take down most of the Alliance with no problem at all. Now, for Harness and Piecemeal, they realize they gotta dip out because their goal was to go around to different locations to collect that genetic material. They were hired to do that. And so you have Harness grab Piecemeal and they jump off an edge. Now you believe, okay, they had just committed suicide or they killed themselves to get away from X-Force. But in reality, Harness has the ability to teleport. And so they were able to get away while the rest of the Alliance got captured by X-Force. Now you have Cable and Domino walk over the tower and say, you are going to tell us every single thing you know about your employer and what they are trying to collect. But on that same last page where we see Domino and Cable about to interrogate Tower, we go to a different location for just a few panels where we see two guys playing chess against one another. Now these two guys, they are the ones who are currently behind everything, and they're playing this game of chess with all the different characters who are so far involved in this story. Now, for Cable and Domino, they were able to interrogate Tower. Now, Tower does inform our heroes that the Alliance of Evil was actually hired by Gentech. Now, what we saw earlier could not be true because Gentech said the Alliance of Evil are going after the same genetic material that we are going after, which means somebody else had hired them. And we saw earlier that IDIC were the ones who actually hired the Alliance of Evil to collect the genetic material around the world. And so Tower had lied to Domino and Cable, but the problem is our heroes don't know that. And so they went over to the building of Gentech and they actually broke into the compound. Now when they get in there, they knock out all the guards. But once you have our heroes get deep into the actual compound, well, they're confronted by the New Warriors. Now, let's talk real briefly about the New Warriors. Okay, so the New Warriors first appeared back in 1989 in Thor number 411. Matter of fact, that was part of the whole Acts of Vengeance story arc. Now, when it came to the New Warriors, they came together because of Dwayne Taylor, better known as Night Thrasher. You see, when it came to Dwayne, his parents were murdered. And so because of that, this man said, you know what, I swore revenge against all crime. And so over the years, he would train to become a better fighter, to become a hero. And so after he reached a point where he believed that he was ready to be a hero, he went out of his way to put together a team of characters who could possibly help him take down crime across the world. Now, the reason why the New Warriors are here right now is because, well, Gentech actually hired the team to protect this place. Here's the problem though. The New Warriors nor X-Force are trying to talk to one another. And so now you have both teams just fighting against each other. Now you do have X-Force and the New Warriors actually fight against each other for a good while. And the only reason why they stop fighting against each other is because the owners of Gentech walk into the room. Now for the owners of Gentech, they say, listen X-Force, we hired the New Warriors to protect this place from the Alliance of Evil. Now for Cable, he says that's crazy because we talked to one of the members of the Alliance of Evil, and they told us that actually you hired them. But he says that is not true at all. We got word that the Alliance of Evil was also trying to collect the same kind of genetic material that we are creating here in our labs. And so we realized that sooner or later, the Alliance will come here and try to steal our project. That is why we hired the New Warriors to protect this place. So now Cable and the rest of X-Force, they just realized they got played by the Alliance of Evil, which means, hey, you know what? Let's go back to the prison and talk to them one more time. And maybe this time they'll give us the right information. But now we have to check in with Harness and Piecemeal. Now the last time we saw them was back in Niagara Falls, where they had Piecemeal collect another piece of that genetic material. But apparently that was a while back, because when we do jump back over to them, we see that Piecemeal must have collected a huge amount of the material because now he's bigger in weight. And so we see him begging Harness to just stop because this man cannot take any more. But for Harness, they don't care at all. They say, continue. We're now here in Alaska because there is another piece of that material that you have to collect. So go ahead and do your job. We have a job to complete here. And so once again, we see Piecemeal being able to collect another piece of this genetic material. Now for X-Force and the New Warriors, they have split up into 3 teams. And so when it comes to the first team, they went over to the prison that the Alliance of Evil were assigned to. And so we see our heroes break out Frenzy. Now at first, she truly believes that our heroes are there to break her out, to help her out. But you then have Cable say, no, I'm not here to break you out. I'm here to ask you more questions because you lied to me last time. And so this time, you better give me the truth or you are going to die. And so you have Frenzy tell the team like, okay, listen, the people who truly did hire us is actually AIM. Now, let's not forget that earlier we saw a company known as IDIC be the ones who claimed that they hired the Alliance of Evil. But in reality, that's a fake name, a shell company. The real people in charge of the Alliance is AIM. And so now our heroes know who they have to go after. But here's the thing though. You have Cable say, give me a location of one of their compounds. And so you have Frenzy being able to hand over that piece of information. Now, for the second team, they do arrive at the location the first team learned about from Frenzy. Now, for the second team, when they do arrive at that location, they do find that AIM was working on some kind of containment ceiling device shaped in a way of a human. And so that tells us that when it comes to the Alliance of Evil, Harness, and also Piecemeal, the reason why they were collecting that genetic material was to put that material in this human-shaped containment ceiling device. And the question is right now, are they trying to create a new kind of robot? And so for our heroes, they're kind of wondering what else could AIM be up to when it comes to this project. Now, the rest of our heroes, the third and final team, they went over to the sub-basement to Charles Xavier School. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, it was the last base for the New Mutants, but they had left the place, and the rest of the school got blown up back in X-Men Inferno. Now, when it comes to our heroes, they want to use Cerebro as a way to cross-reference all the information that they have received from Gentech. Now, here is the big thing. So as we know, the Alliance of Evil, they were going around collecting different pieces of this genetic material. But here's the catch though. All those different pieces came from somewhere else before arriving at those different locations. They all came from Muir Island. And so now the third team has to take that info and tell the rest of the teams what they had just learned. And we do get another moment where we see Harness and we also see Piecemeal going out of their way to collect another piece of that genetic material. Really, it's more Harness saying, you are going to do what I asked you to do here, Piecemeal, so go ahead and absorb another piece of that genetic material. But here's the problem though. Once again, we see that he has gotten bigger and bigger when it comes to weight. And so it's kind of telling us that sooner or later, he will be unable to absorb any more of that material. So once you have all three teams being able to come back together as one big team, you then have Cable realize something very important here. He wants to know, when did all these different pieces break apart from one another? And so you then have our heroes come to find out that it happened back on October 13th, 1987. Now for Cable, that is a very important date. And the reason why? Because that is the same day the X-Men had fought against Proteus, the son to Moira McTaggart. Around this time in Marvel Comics, he was kind of known as the most powerful mutant on the planet. The dude had the ability to warp reality around him. And so for Cable, he's kind of like, oh my God, they're going out of their way to collect the different pieces of Proteus to bring him back to life and to possibly use them for their own evil scheme. And this is What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over Kings of Pain, the next crossover that we are talking about on my channel for the X-Men. Now, when it comes to Kings of Pain, it was a crossover that was done over in the annuals for Marvel Comics around this time. 3 of the annuals were X titles, and one of them being a New Warriors annual. Now, with that being said, so far we had learned that there were 2 different companies working for 2 mysterious people to bring back a certain character, and that character is no other than Proteus. Now, Proteus is a very powerful character, and so let me explain. So when it comes to Proteus, his real name is Kevin McTaggart. He is the son to another character known as Moira McTaggart. Now, here's the thing. There have been a lot of retcons done on this character over the years in Marvel Comics. And I'm not going to sit down and try to explain all those different kinds of retcons for the sake of this video. So all we know right now is he is the son to Moira McTaggart. Now, when it came to Kevin, when he was young, he did gain his mutant ability, but that was the beginning of the downfall. So once he did gain his mutant ability, it began to, well, burn out his body. Now, before we dive deeper into his origin, I want to say that when it comes to Kevin, he has the ability to warp reality around him, making him a very powerful mutant. But like I said though, once he did gain his mutant ability, well, unfortunately, it began to burn out his body. And so Moira McTaggart had to lock up Kevin in a special kind of cell to keep him alive just long enough until she was able to find a way to save her son. Unfortunately, there was a battle between the X-Men and Magneto. Now, because of that battle, his cell got damaged. And so because of that, he was able to walk free again. But here comes the big problem. You see, that cell was keeping his body alive. And so when the cell got damaged, his body completely died. And so he had to find a new host. And that kind of told us that when it comes to Proteus, he's kind of like this source of energy floating around looking for the next host to keep him alive. And so in the original story that he appeared in, we saw him going to body, hoping to find the right body to keep him alive long enough so that he is able to rejoin society. But that's the problem though. His powers just kept burning every single body that he would find. Now the story did end with Colossus being able to kill off Proteus because one of his weaknesses is metal. And so once you had Colossus being able to kill off Proteus, we were left to believe that he was gone forever. But Kings of Pain changed that. See, we kind of find out that after Colossus had supposedly defeated Proteus, Proteus did not die. His energy body was just broken into many pieces across the world. Now, there were two companies who were trying to bring Proteus back to life. One of those companies we can totally forget about because by this point, they're no longer really important for the sake of the story. And so now we can focus on AIM, one of the two companies that was trying to bring Proteus back to life. You see, when it came to AIM, they realized if you are able to go around the world to find those different pieces of Proteus and actually put him back together, but also put him inside a containment suit, then Proteus could come back to life. And that was AIM's goal. But also AIM was planning to use Proteus to control him. And if they had that power to control him, they'll be unbeatable because again, Proteus has the ability to warp reality around him, making him one of the most powerful mutants in the world. And so right now you have X-Force and New Warriors freaking out. And they said, listen, if they're trying to bring back Proteus, we have to tell Moira McTaggart. And so they went over to Muir Island. Now, there is something else we do have to talk about, but luckily we can talk about that thing as we dive into the opening pages of today's story, and that would be Moira McTaggart. Now, you see, when it came to Moira, in the earlier story arcs of our coverage on the X-Men, she has been acting different, more aggressive a lot of times, and sometimes more happy than usual. And so for our heroes on the X-Men, the main X-Men team, they begin to realize that Moira McTaggart is not her usual self. Now, let's not forget that when it came to Moira McTaggart, around this time in Marvel Comics, she had her own X-Men team that she had put together on the island as well. But here's the thing. They're also not acting normal either. And the question is right now, why? Now, when it came to the earlier story arcs, we did get a few hints on who could most likely be in control of those characters. This book right here, it flat out tells us who is controlling Moira McTaggart and her X-Men. It is the Shadow King. And here is the reason why it's so important, because you have X-Force and the New Warriors arrive to her island to inform her like, hey, AIM is trying to bring back your son. We need to work together. Except she's not answering their calls. And so when X-Force and the New Warriors get close to her island, she turns on her defense system to basically get rid of them. Now you do have our heroes try their best to get rid of those weapons, but then you have Moira walk out with her X-Men to get into a battle with our heroes. Now, that battle does last for a few pages, but after a while, you didn't have Cable saying, stop, or I'll shoot you. Like, stop right now, or I shoot you. I came here for a good reason. I came here to tell you that AIM is trying to bring back your son, Kevin. Now, like I said earlier, when it comes to AIM, they're trying to put Proteus back together. And so what they did was they hired two characters known as Harness and Piecemeal. And so Piecemeal has the ability to absorb the different pieces of Proteus into his body. And so because of Piecemeal, they're going to be able to actually bring Proteus back to life. And so we continue to see Piecemeal being used as a way to absorb all the different pieces of Proteus. Now, he is being controlled by Harness. Now, we don't know much about these two characters, but these last two chapters are going to give us the ability to learn more about them, especially Harness. And here is the reason why. So while you have Piecemeal going out of his way to collect another piece of Proteus, well, you have Harness saying, you know, I own you. You're mine, inside and out. And so we're kind of left to believe that they're very close to one another in some kind of way, possibly being his mother, a very evil mother. Now, getting back over to our heroes, we do see X-Force and the New Warriors being able to catch Moira McTaggart up to speed, and her X-Men as well, to say, hey, this is what happened so far in this story, and so now you know, do you want to help us to stop AIM before they are able to bring your son back to life? Now for Moira McTaggart, she's very upset about the idea that AIM is trying to bring her son back to life and most likely use him for their own personal gain. And so yes, you have Moira McTaggart agree to work with X-Force and the New Warriors to stop AIM, and that includes her X-Men team as well. Now, while you have all three teams talking to one another, well, they get a call from WHO. Now, WHO stands for Weird Happening Organization. They go around the world to investigate weird things happening in the world. And so right now, they're calling up our heroes saying, hey, listen, we just saw two characters, one in an armor suit and a young boy getting bigger and bigger, like he's been eating too much. Yeah, they're over here. Can y'all go there and check it out for us, please? And so our heroes now know it's Harness and Piecemeal, and they gotta go. Now we do get a quick page to remind us that there are two mysterious men who have been working in the shadows, and we still have no idea who they are, but when it comes to Gentech, AIM, Harness, Piecemeal, all these different characters, they're being controlled technically by these two guys. They're playing a game against each other to see who will be able to actually pull off this master scheme of bringing back Proteus. But either way, they're playing chess with all of our different characters so far. Now the rest of this chapter is really more of our heroes working together to stop Harness, but to find a way to save Piecemeal as well. Now, I want to shift our focus onto Harness, and here is the reason why. So when it comes to Harness, she has the ability to use this energy rod as a whip or use it as a leash. Hence the name Harness. Now, the rest of her weapons, they all come from her armor suit that she wears. But anyways, you do have our heroes trying their best to bring her down, while you have other heroes trying their best to save Piecemeal. Now, I'm going to skip over a few pages. And the reason why, because most of those pages are just really, you know, seeing our heroes trying to bring down Harness, but trying to save Piecemeal. I want to get the good point of this chapter where we see our heroes realize that Piecemeal has absorbed too many pieces of Proteus. And so it does seem like this kid, this young boy, might actually die here. He might actually explode. And technically he does, but he doesn't die right there. You see, because he did absorb so many pieces of Proteus, you have the two young boys, Proteus and also Piecemeal, combined into one being, giving birth to a new Proteus, better known as Proteus 2. So yes, Proteus has returned, and for our heroes, this is a huge problem, because now you are talking about the idea of one of the most powerful mutants who has the ability to warp reality returning to Marvel Comics, and right now, he is about to cause a whole lot of problems. Now, the last chapter for Kings of Pain was actually an X-Factor annual. Now, with this annual, it really does show how powerful Proteus truly is. Because, like I said earlier, this was one of the most powerful mutants around his time in X-Men comics. The man had the ability to warp reality around him. And so, with him being back, but now being combined with Piecemeal, Scotland is no longer looking like, well, Scotland. Right now, Scotland is kind of like a series of geometrical figures all over the place, and they're being used to represent different people or buildings in Scotland. Now, for X Factor, they know that this is Proteus, and they know they have to go deeper and deeper into Scotland to hopefully find him and to hopefully bring him down, because really, other teams out there across the world, they're kind of wondering if they should help out when it comes to something like this right here. You have Excalibur wondering if they should jump in. You have the Avengers wondering if they should jump in. You have other teams out there on standby saying, all right, X Factor, you're saying you got this. Please show us you can. If you can't, we're gonna jump in. Now, once you have X Factor being able to find Proteus at the heart of this whole area, well, they run into a huge problem, which is, well, Proteus. Because, like I said, this man can warp reality around him. And so you have X Factor try to use their different abilities, hoping to actually bring him down. But the problem is, though, Proteus is able to stop their attacks in so many different ways, because again, he's warping reality around them. Now, for Beast, he does learn one big lesson right here. The idea that Proteus is no longer weak to metal, because you have Beast try his best to come from behind, hoping to take down Proteus with some metal gauntlets, and he finds out that does not work anymore. And so you have Proteus just take down the entire team, and then he teleports them into his mind. Now for AIM, they're seeing what's happening right now in Scotland, but this is AIM saying, okay, our plan failed. Like, our goal was to contain Proteus before he was able to come back to full power, but unfortunately our plan failed. So now we're gonna back out. Now, some of the members of AIM, they're kind of wondering, hey, what are we going to do with Harness? And they said, listen, if she survives, most likely she'll be arrested. But if she does survive and not arrested, then don't worry, we'll take care of her down the road. But for right now, we gotta make sure there's no trail that leads back to us that shows that we were involved in this hot mess. Now, once you have X Factor being able to meet up with X-Force, the New Warriors, the X-Men inside the mind of Proteus, this is where Jean Grey tells us how they're going to be able to stop Proteus. You see, for Jean Grey, she realized when her mind was connected to Proteus' mind, she learned something about him. Now, something else I want to mention is that around this time in X-Men comics, Jean Grey no longer had the ability to be a telepath. So it was really Proteus who was able to connect his mind to her. But either way, with their minds being connected to one another, she learned that Proteus was happy when he was technically quote unquote dead. Let me explain. So when it came to Proteus, when he was defeated by Colossus many years ago, his body did fall apart to all those different pieces across the world. But when his body was like that, he felt nothing. And honestly, that was when he was the happiest. Because let's not forget, before that, he was locked away in a cell because of Moira Taggart, because she believed that she'll be able to find a cure for him. But also, we cannot forget that this new body we're seeing right now is not just Proteus, it's also Piecemeal as well. And Piecemeal was being abused by his mother, Harness. Oh, by the way, Harness is his mother. Fun fact right there. And so that is why she was so big on him getting all that power, because she wanted to control that power as well for herself. Either way, she abused her son. And so both kids right now are crying out for help in the idea that they no longer want to be around. But here comes the problem though. Proteus is just too powerful for our heroes to kill off, which means they have to convince Proteus to actually kill himself to give him what he wants. The idea of finally being free, to feel nothing. Now, for our heroes, they do realize that they do have more options than one. Like, yes, when it comes to Proteus, most likely the world is better off without him because how powerful he truly is. But at the same time, Proteus wants to feel nothing. We did have our heroes say, let's not forget that AIM had built a containment suit that could be used to give Proteus a new life in this world and give us a chance to show him a better life than he had the last time when he was around. A better life than what Moira Taggart gave him. A better life than what Harness gave Piecemeal. Because again, Piecemeal and Proteus, they're combined into one. And technically right now, both mothers in their mind have done a horrible job. Now for me personally, I say Moira Taggart did a bad job, yes, but not completely as bad as, Piecemeal's mom, Harness. Either way, it's our hero saying, let's give Proteus the options for himself to choose. Like, we can't choose for him. It's up to him. But that's the problem, though. Proteus can't decide what he wants to do. And it all comes down to Moira Taggart, because she was able to talk to her son and say, listen, I understand that what you gone through in your past was horrible, but honestly, the best option for you to finally be happy again is to go ahead and kill yourself, commit suicide. And so with Proteus, he also realized that she is right. And so with that, we see Proteus die at the end of the story. Now, the very last page does show us who were the two characters in charge this entire time when it came to Kings of Pain. Now, the first one to me personally made sense. It was Gideon. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, Gideon was still a very new character. We were still learning more about this character. But the other one, well, it's Toad. Now, for me personally, I didn't like the idea of Toad being this other mysterious character in the shadows. But I do understand why they used this character for, because in the past, Toad was always used by other people for their own schemes. And so for the first time, it was time for Toad to be the one to use other people for his schemes. And so at the end of the book is Toad saying that he loves the idea of being in charge, being able to control other people for his own personal scheme. And so guys, we are finally here. We have finally reached a point where we are going to sit down and talk about X Factor Endgame. Now, this is one heck of a story arc because we are talking about the idea of X Factor going up against Apocalypse. Now, yes, they have fought against him before, but this time it's completely different. And the reason why, because Apocalypse has a plan, and that plan is all about Nathan Summers, the son to Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. Apocalypse got some big plans for him. Now, when it comes to Endgame, it's so important that other books down the road are going to tie back into this book later on to kind of give us the complete origin of Cable when it comes to X-Men comics. That's how important Endgame is. Like, it's so important in so many different ways. Let's go ahead and dive into this. Now, in the opening pages of this book, we do see Cyclops and Beast begin to freak out. And the reason why, because, well, the aircraft known as the ship is somewhat malfunctioning. Now, when it comes to the ship, we have learned so far that it was actually created by the Celestials a long time ago, but you didn't have Apocalypse being able to take over the ship. Now, something else I should mention is that when it comes to the ship, is being run by an AI system. But either way, when it comes to the ship, it was being used by Apocalypse until our heroes were actually able to free it from his control. And ever since then, the ship has been the base for X-Factor for a very long time. But out of nowhere, you had the power in the ship just go off. And for our heroes, they're kind of wondering why. Now, for the ship, it's able to fix itself. And so then our heroes are kind of like, hey, you know what? Go ahead and make sure that everything is okay with you while we go ahead and continue on with our training session. Now, while you have our heroes going through their training session, they don't realize that they're being watched by Apocalypse, but also they're being watched by a new group of characters that are working for Apocalypse. And that would be the Dark Riders. Now, over time in our coverage in X-Men comics, we're going to learn more about this particular group of characters who do work for Apocalypse. But for right now, we do learn their names. You have Foxbat, Tusk, Gauntlet, Synapse, Hard Drive, and Barrage. Now, for Hard Drive, she is somewhat more important here. And here is the reason why. See, Hard Drive is actually hacking into the system of the ship to hopefully take over the ship completely and begin Apocalypse's true plans for X-Factor in their ship. And so for our heroes, they have no idea what is happening behind the scenes. Now, something else I do want to mention is that when it comes to Cyclops, he's being real tough on the team recently. And the reason why, because, well, the extension agenda, but really more because in his entire career, he has seen so many different people die over time being an X-Men or a member of X-Factor. And so for him, he's kind of tired of the idea of seeing so many people dying. And so he says, listen, the reason why that last session right there for training was so hard is to make sure that we are ready to protect ourselves, but other people who need our protection. Now, there is another character that does play a small role in this storyline, and that will be Charlotte Jones. Now, Charlotte Jones was actually a love interest for Archangel around his time in Marvel Comics. You see, when it came to Charlotte, she was married to a police officer who unfortunately died in a drug war. And so because of that, she quit being a nurse and became a police officer because she hated the idea of helping criminals get better. But there was a time period where she was able to meet Archangel and they were able to build a bond with one another. And we're going to see her appear here and there throughout this story. And really, the next few pages really does focus on the love interest for each of our team members here. So for example, the next page really do focus on Cyclops and Jean Grey getting their relationship back on track. And then after them, we do see that Iceman is still with Opal around his time in Marvel Comics. Now, unfortunately, for Beast, he did have a love interest around this time in Marvel Comics. The problem was that him and Trish Tilby, they would always go back and forth between if they would get together or not. If they did get together, would they stay together? It was an up and down relationship. And so right now, we see Beast watching her on the news, giving out another report to kind of remind us that Beast does have somebody. It's just that right now, he can't be with her. But now it's time for us to get into the action of the story. So we do pick up with Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Beast, who are the only 3 members of X Factor right now at the main base for the team, the ship. Archangel and Iceman are currently away from the base to spend some time with their girlfriends. And so for our 3 heroes who are at the base, well, they realize they're being attacked by the Dark Riders. Now, I want to shift our focus over to Jean Grey. And here is the reason why. So we had to remember that around this time in Marvel Comics, Jean Grey no longer had the ability to be a telepath for a very long time in X Factor Comics. This is the moment where she does regain that ability. You see, she is confronted by one of the Dark Riders known as Synapse. Now, when it comes to Synapse, he takes Jean Grey into the astral plane, and his main goal is to take her out, except while doing battle against her on the astral plane, he was able to give her the ability back of being a telepath. And really, that was not his goal, but it happened on accident. And so because she was able to regain that ability, she was able to mind link with the rest of X Factor. And so that is how Iceman and Archangel learns, hey, we're being attacked right now at the main base. Get back over here to help us out. Now, for our heroes, they do come back together to fight against the Dark Riders. And really, for our heroes, they are able to take down the Dark Riders. Now, at first, it does look like our heroes are going to struggle, and also does look like Jean Grey is out of the battle because Synapse. We kind of find out that she was actually able to defeat him on the astral plane, and then after a while, she was able to join back in the battle against the Dark Riders. And so once you have our heroes being able to take them down, they believe that now they can rest. But here comes the big problem though. You see, Hard Drive in this entire chapter has been trying her best to connect to the ship. And by this point of the story, she was able to do that. And so now she's putting in a virus that is going to infect the entire ship. And so for our heroes, they have no idea that things are about to get a whole lot worse. But as we dive into the second chapter of this video, we actually pick up with different heroes of the Marvel Universe trying their best to protect the innocent people in Manhattan. And the reason why? Because of Hard Drive's virus. You see, that virus had made the ship begin to attack the entire city around it right now. And so innocent people's lives are in danger. Other heroes have to step in. Now, here's the big thing about the idea of the ship right now causing a lot of damage. You see, when it came to our heroes, when they had decided to place a ship in the middle of New York, in the middle of Manhattan, a lot of people were worried about the idea of the ship possibly doing something like this down the road. Because once word got out, the ship was actually being run by an AI system, more and more people got scared of the idea of the ship most likely attacking the city. And here we are now. You have the ship attacking Manhattan left and right. Innocent people's lives are in danger, and other heroes have to step in to help out. But now I want to jump back inside the ship, and really I want to shift our focus back onto Jean Grey again, because with Jean Grey now being a telepath, she now has to relearn how to use this ability all over again. And so for Jean Grey, she realized that she's now hearing a voice in her head, and the voice that she is hearing is actually the ship calling out for help. But let's not forget that Hard Drive was able to put a virus inside the ship. And so right now you have the ship begin to attack our heroes as well. Now Jean Grey, she is taken now by Hard Drive, because once Hard Drive realized that Jean Grey in the ship had a mind link to one another, you had Hard Drive use that mind link as a way to attack Jean Grey to take her out. So bam, she's off the board right now. But then Cyclops also hears a voice, and it seems like right now it's the ship once again calling out to our heroes. But now it's saying you need to go to your son, Nathan, Christopher. He's in danger. And so for Cyclops, him and X-Factor head that way to check in on Christopher. Now, when we jump over to Christopher, we do see that one of the members of the Dark Riders was actually able to get into the room that Christopher was at. And it does seem like the young child is about to be taken over to Apocalypse, but that is the moment he is saved by another new character, and her name is Ascani. Now, this is where I say that there's going to be a lot of books that are going to tie back into this moment right here in X-Men comics, because of this character and her clan in the far, far future. And so she came here from that far future to save the life of Christopher. And so she was able to get rid of the one member of the Dark Rider that was trying to kidnap him. Now, after being able to do that, she does her relieve about the idea that she was able to protect him, except she begins to freak out when X-Factor walks into the room, because to her, she believed that they were also members of the Dark Riders, and they were there to grab Christopher, and so she attacked him. And then after her attack, she realized that she had made a huge mistake. But the problem is, by the time she realized in her mistake, well, when it comes to Christopher, he was grabbed by the Dark Rider that she had knocked out earlier, and he was able to leave with Christopher and take him straight over to Apocalypse. Now, after she realized that she had made a huge mistake, you have Ascani also leave as well. Now, for our heroes, they're kind of wondering a lot of things right now. Like, one, why would Apocalypse want Christopher for? And two, who was that woman? Because it seemed like she was actually on our side here. Now, I want to shift our focus back onto Charlotte for a brief moment. And the reason why, because with the ship right now attacking Manhattan all over the place, you now have police officers trying their best to help out where they can. And that includes Charlotte. Now, for Charlotte, she realized that she does have close ties with Archangel, and she wants to know what exactly is going on with the ship. And so she heads over to the base of X-Factor and being able to actually get onto the ship. Now, once she's able to get inside, you did have our heroes tell her, hey, listen, we know it's bad out there right now. And we know the reason why is because our ship. We're trying to tell you right now, there's some kind of virus inside our ship, and we're trying our best to fix it right now before things get a whole lot worse. But here's the thing. You see, even though hard drive was able to upload a virus into the system of the ship, you had a ship right now trying its best to fight back against hard drive's virus. Now, the ship knows that this is a losing battle, but here's the catch though. The ship also does not want to be a slave to Apocalypse again, like it was in the past before X-Factor was able to save it from Apocalypse. Now, for the ship, the only way to make sure it does not become a slave for Apocalypse again is to kill itself. And so you had a ship say, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and send all of us up into space and blow up. It's the best way to make sure that I myself does not become a slave for Apocalypse. Now, for our heroes, they tried their best to reason with the ship by saying, don't do that. First off, we're still on the ship right now, which means if you blow up, we are also going to die as well. But also, our heroes have built a bond with the ship. They hate the idea of seeing the ship kill itself because then they lost someone else close to them. But a third and final reason really comes from Cyclops. You see, you have Cyclops say, even though you're telling us that you don't want to be a slave for Apocalypse again, you don't know that this is what he wanted you to do as a way to remove you out of his way of winning, or to make things harder for us when it comes to going against him. Like what you're doing right now is most likely something he wanted you to do. But for the ship, it's kind of like, no, the best option I have right now is to go ahead and remove myself before he's able to use me for his own evil plans down the road. And so by the end of the second chapter, we actually see the ship go up into space and blows up. And we're left to believe that our heroes are now dead. But as we dive into the third chapter of today's video, we kind of find out that our heroes had actually survived, thanks to the ship being able to save its core system and construct a survival module around the X-Factor team. Now, they're still floating in space, but luckily for our heroes, well, the Inhumans were nearby. And so you have the Inhumans being able to bring X-Factor into their own actual ship. Now, once you have our heroes being able to get onto the actual ship of the Inhumans, they're then confronted by the royal family. So like Crystal, Black Bolt, Karnak, Gorgon, Lockjaw, and that's really it. The rest of the royal family and really the rest of the Inhumans are currently prisoners to Apocalypse. And so now we're going to have the royal family and X-Factor work together to basically defeat Apocalypse to save Christopher, but to also save the Inhumans who are currently prisoners to Apocalypse. Now, while you have the two teams trying to work together to make a plan on how they're going to attack Apocalypse, well, that is the moment where you have more members of the Dark Riders being able to teleport into the actual ship of the Inhumans, grab Crystal, and they leave. And so now our heroes are definitely trying to hurry up to take down Apocalypse, to save the Inhumans, but to also save Christopher as well. Now, I want to jump over to Apocalypse, and the reason why, because you have Apocalypse right now looking over the boy Christopher, and this is him kind of telling us that he knows that Christopher can be a very huge problem down the road if he stays alive, or if Apocalypse is not able to find a way to control the young boy. And so for Apocalypse, he's right now considering the idea of killing off Christopher to kind of keep himself alive, or to make sure his plans actually do happen. But then he's told that, hey, we're being under attack at this exact moment. Now, something else I do want to mention is that when it comes to our heroes, they're battling against Apocalypse on the blue area of the moon. The blue area of the moon is this one area where you are actually able to breathe normal without the idea of worrying that you could die while being out there in space. And so for the Inhumans, they were living in that area. And so, of course, Apocalypse took over the area. And now it's our heroes trying to get rid of him. Now, once you have our heroes being able to get inside the actual building of Apocalypse, they go their separate ways. So for the Inhumans, their goal is to free their people so that they're no longer slaves for Apocalypse. And for X-Factor, they're going after Apocalypse to hopefully save Nathan. Now, as our heroes go deeper and deeper into the base of Apocalypse, well, that is when they do realize where they're at. Like, yes, they're on the blue area of the moon, but also this particular area is where Jean Grey had died all those years ago back in the Dark Phoenix saga. Oh wait, that is not true, because let's not forget that we were told in the early days of X-Factor that Jean Grey was never the Phoenix, that in reality it was the Phoenix pretending to be Jean Grey, while Jean Grey was actually the bottom of Jamaican Bay being healed up. But either way, by this point in Marvel Comics, she had absorbed the memories of the Phoenix and Madeline Pryor, and so for her, she kind of knows what it was like to die here on the blue area of the moon. Cyclops and Beast, they were there. And so for them, they're kind of like, yeah, this place is very familiar. Now for Archangel and Iceman, they weren't there, but they do know what exactly went down in this area of the moon. But once you have our heroes being able to get to the main room where Apocalypse is at, well, they're confronted by a enormous size Apocalypse. And they also see that Nathan is technically hooked up to Apocalypse. And so for our heroes, they're like, okay, you know what? All gloves off. We got to find a way to take him down to save Christopher before something bad really happens to him. But here's the thing. Something bad is about to happen to Christopher in his story arc. Now, the final chapter, we do pick up with our heroes once again going up against Apocalypse, hoping to bring him down. But before they're able to do that, they got to fight against his Dark Riders once again. Now, when it comes to his Dark Riders, I feel like personally, they should know how to fight against our heroes a tad bit better by this point, because let's not forget, in the first chapter, they were watching our heroes training in the ship. And so I felt like these guys should know how to fight somewhat better against our heroes by this point of the story. They can't, because our heroes are able to take down the Dark Riders very easily. Now, after doing that, you did have our heroes be attacked by Medusa and Crystal, two Inhumans of the royal family who are currently being controlled by Apocalypse. And so because of those two, the entire X Factor team gets knocked out. Now, luckily for our heroes, they're not held as prisoners for too long, because you didn't have Black Bolt and the rest of the Inhumans reappear to help break them free once again. Now, once you have X Factor being able to get back out of the containers, you have Jean Grey and Hank go and try to save Christopher, while the rest of the team try their best to deal with Apocalypse. Now, this begins the whole idea of us saying goodbye to Christopher as a baby, but then getting into the idea of covering different books explaining how he'll become Cable down the road. Now, while you have Beast and Jean Grey trying to save the young baby, you also have Ascani return into the picture. Now, again, this begins the process of her taking Christopher into the far future as a way to save him, because once you have Beast and Jean Grey able to get to the baby, they realize that Apocalypse had put a virus into the baby. Now, this is the same kind of virus that was given over to the ship. And so right now, our heroes truly believe that there's no way to actually save him. Like, yes, they want to believe there is a way, but unfortunately, they know that most likely there's not a way to save the young boy from this kind of virus. Now, when it comes to young Nathan, he is able to take Jean Grey into his mind. Now, this is Nathan kind of asking Jean Grey to help out to fight against the virus inside of his body. Now, on your screen at this moment, you should see like Apocalypse in his mind. And the reason why, because to the young boy, the virus is Apocalypse, because Apocalypse gave him the virus. And so right now, it's him asking Jean to fight against Apocalypse in his mind, which again is actually the virus. Now, she is able to bring Cyclops also to the mind of young Nathan to help out, but that's the problem though. Even though Cyclops and Jean Grey are able to get rid of the Apocalypse inside his mind, that virus is still going to be there, coming back over and over again, trying to attack the body of young Nathan. And so once we're able to get into the regular world again, you then have Cyclops being able to release a huge amount of energy to get rid of Apocalypse. But now it's time to deal with the idea of what's happening to Nathan. Now, for most fans out there, it's already well known that for Christopher, aka Cable, he was given the techno-organic virus. And so right now he's trying to use his powers and also Jean Grey's powers to keep the virus at bay, because if they don't, that virus is going to kill him. Now at this point, they have no idea how to actually handle this kind of thing, but Cyclops knows that there's something different about Asani, because she came here from the far future to help out. And she says, listen, in my future, we have a way to help him, but the only way to help him is to take him into the future. Now for Cyclops, he's wondering, will she bring him back? And she says no. Like, he has to say goodbye to his son to hopefully save his life. And maybe down the road, there could be a possibility he'll meet his son, even though he already has, because Cable has been around for a good while by this point in Marvel Comics. And so Cyclops realized this is the only way to save the young boy's life. And so he has to let him go into the far future. Now, by this point right here, there were so many different books that kind of told what happened to Nathan once he arrived in that future. And we're going to cover those books down the road in our coverage in X-Men Comics. Now, the last page of this book, we do see the Watcher was watching everything. And apparently, to the Watcher, he agreed with what Cyclops did as a way to save young Nathan. And so the book ends on that note. Now, with the book ending right here, we then dive into the next crossover, which is the Muir Island Saga. And that should come very soon on my channel. But with we are finally here. We are finally going to dive into Chris Claremont's and Jim Lee's X-Men from 1991. And this was a big moment. Like, you have to understand, back in 1991, this was a huge changing point for Marvel Comics. Really a huge changing point for X-Men Comics, because you now had X-Force, you had a new X-Factor team, and then you had two new X-Men team that were being led by Chris Claremont, but the main book, the X-Men book, was being written by Chris Claremont and drawn by Jim Lee. Like, you had so much happening in the early stages of this era. And guys, I'm so excited that we are able to just finally dive into this. Now, today's video, we're going to cover X-Men issue number 1 through 3, because it's a 3-part story arc that really does establish a lot of things that we are going to see down the road in later books when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. And that would be Magneto. So let me explain. When it comes to Magneto, when it came to Chris Claremont, really, he had this huge change in the character of Magneto, because at first he was the X-Men's main bad guy, right? But then under Chris Claremont, we saw Magneto go through a huge change where he became an actual hero, an actual teacher. You see, when Charles Xavier stepped down as the headmaster of the school, Magneto took over. And matter of fact, he was the leader of the X-Men, the main teacher for the New Mutants. But then after a while, we saw him go back to his old ways, but not completely. So by this point in our coverage over the X-Men, this is a guy who's just tired of the human race, because he had tried so hard to make things better for mutant kind. He tried it his ways. That did not work. He even tried it Charles Xavier's ways. And of course, that did not work either. And so he just left the Earth and went over to Asteroid M to be left alone. He made a base on the asteroid. Now, in the opening pages of the book, we can kind of see that this begins the process of pushing him back into the role of a bad guy, because in the opening pages of X-Men number 1, we do pick up with a spaceship trying to head over to the base of Asteroid M to see Magneto, except they're being followed by 2 other spaceships. Now, I want to focus on the main one that's trying to get away, and the reason why, because they're looking for Magneto, because they look at Magneto as their leader, that's somebody who can actually save the mutant race. Now, the other spaceships, they're also stopped by Magneto as well, but after doing that and hearing these 2 mutants cry out for his help, he says, you know what? I'm going to take all 3 spaceships over to my asteroid and see if we are able to sit down and figure out what exactly is going on. But like I said, this begins the whole idea of Magneto going back into his role as the super villain. But now we have to jump over to the Soviet Union. And this is really important because there is a long history with the Soviet Union and Magneto. But that history is going to be brought up in later chapters in today's video. But we do see the Soviet Union freaking out. And the reason why, because Asteroid M floats right above their country. Like, yes, it's in space, but it's floating right above their country. And so because of their past with Magneto, they are very concerned about what he could possibly do to them, but also the rest of the world. And so they call up Washington, D.C. to begin the process of the Magneto protocols. Now, we're going to learn more about that here down the road, but just know it's really important. Now, we jump over to Nick Fury, who's talking to the President of America, and he says, hey, we might begin the Magneto protocols. But for Nick, he has a other idea to see if Magneto is actually a possible threat. And of course, he's talking about the X-Men. And so this begins the idea of having the X-Men going up against Magneto, but we're also going to see the X-Men split up into two different teams. Because around this point in time in Marvel Comics, you had a good chunk of X titles out there. You had Excalibur, you had X-Factor, you had X-Force, you had Wolverine. But when it came to the Uncanny X-Men, well, when X-Factor, the original X-Factor, had rejoined the X-Men, you now had 14 characters. And really, that was enough to have two different teams to go out there on different kind of missions and to handle things at separate times. And so this book right here kind of kicks off the idea of having X-Men Gold and X-Men Blue. So when it comes to X-Men Gold, that will be Storm's team. And Storm's team is going to be taking place in Uncanny X-Men. And yes, we're still going to continue our coverage over Uncanny X-Men as well. Now, the ones who are going to join Storm team is going to be Jean Grey, Archangel, Colossus, and Iceman. Now, for Blue team, which is Cyclops team, is going to be Wolverine, Beast, Gambit, Psylocke, and Rogue. And honestly, Blue team is a whole lot better than Gold team. Like, they are definitely stacked. But the reason why Cyclops and Storm are the two leaders of those two teams, because over the years in Marvel Comics or X-Men comics, those two characters were the two leaders of the X-Men for a very long time. First was Cyclops, and then he stepped down and Storm took over. So it only makes sense that those two characters would be the leaders of the two X-Men teams. Now, we do see the X-Men testing out their new defensive system, but it's also a way for Jim Lee to kind of show us the new outfits that most of the X-Men are going to wear from this point on until the next costume changes down the road. But later on, we see that Nick Fury had called up the X-Men. Now, this is Nick expressing the idea the Soviet Union is very worried about Magneto having his spaceship, or his asteroid M, right over their country. Now, you have Nick say, listen, they're not going to do anything at all, but they're getting very close to just pulling the trigger. But for the X-Men, they're kind of wondering, why in the world are they so afraid of Magneto? Or why are they trying to go after him for? Like, yes, there is a long history between the two parties, but Magneto hasn't done anything at all. The three spaceships that flew towards his asteroid, yes, they were destroyed, but all the people on those spaceships have survived. They're currently being kept on his asteroid at the moment. And so for the X-Men, they're kind of wondering what to do here, because one, Magneto is being peaceful, but two, he used to be an ally. Remember, like I said, he was the headmaster of the school. He was also the leader of the X-Men. Only recently, he has stepped away from both of those roles. And so for our heroes, they're kind of like, we need time to think about this. But getting back over to the process of seeing Magneto slowly turning into a bad guy, we jump over back to his asteroid M. Now, like I said earlier, he was able to take all the people who were in those three different spaceships over to his asteroid. Now, we do have two different crews. The ones in yellows are mutants who are trying to get away from the human race to find Magneto, to find their leader. And that would be Fabian Cortez Anna Marie Cortez, and I forgot the third person's name. But for Fabian and also Anna Marie, they're going to be very important for this book, especially Fabian. Now, the Green Crew, they work for S.H.I.E.L.D., but they are just regular humans. And so they're very upset with Fabian and his crew because, one, they follow the crew all the way out into space, but two, those 3 spaceships got destroyed and now they're stuck on asteroid M. And so you do have both crews fight against each other. Now, Magneto did put a barrier around his room to cancel out everyone's powers to make sure nobody actually gets hurt. Except when Magneto walks into the room, Anna Marie actually does get hurt by one of the humans. And this moment right here is really the starting point of Magneto saying, okay, you know what? Forget you humans. Like, you just attacked a mutant who was just trying to get away from you. Like, you brought her down. Even though you're telling me that you work for law enforcement, what right do you have to kill somebody who was not actually attacking you? And so for Fabian, this is also his moment because he's now telling Magneto, hey, listen, man, right now, back down on Earth, they are gathering up together, teaming up, all these different countries, getting ready to attack you, coming after you. And right now, with what you did earlier by destroying all their spaceships, they took that as a statement of war. And so now you need to give them a bigger statement to tell them that you are somebody to not mess with. And so you then have X-Men realize that Magneto is now coming down to Earth. And so you have Charles say, okay, blue team, you gotta go. And that would be Cyclops team. And so they take the Blackbird and they begin to fly over to where Magneto is at. And this begins us sitting down and discussing the long history between Magneto and also the Soviet Union. You see, when it comes to the Soviet Union, a long time ago, they tried to attack Magneto. And it was a time where Magneto was trying to get rid of all nuclear weapons across the world. And unfortunately, the Soviet Union kind of took that as a possible threat down the road and tried to take him down with nuclear missiles. Now, they were going to use a submarine that was holding some nuclear missiles and fire them at Magneto. But Magneto found the submarine and sent it to the bottom of the ocean, killing off every single person inside that submarine. But right now in the present day, he's bringing that same one right back up again. And the reason why? Because all the nuclear missiles inside that submarine can still be used if Magneto wants to. But right now, he's going to use them as a self-defense against people who might try to attack his asteroid. He said, hey, I'm not going to use it right now, but if you try anything, I will send one of these things down from my asteroid to your country. Now, while he's trying to leave, he is confronted by the X-Men. And this is really important because it really shows that the X-Men are not trying to reason with the man, trying to listen to the man. You see, as soon as they see him, they're trying to attack him because they already believe that Magneto has slipped up, that Magneto has gone back to his old ways again. Now, the only person who's really trying to talk to Magneto is Rogue. And honestly, this is a callback to some of the early days of Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men, where you basically had him establish that Rogue and Magneto had some kind of feelings for each other. And honestly, those feelings are still there. And so she's the only person trying to talk to Magneto, to reason with Magneto. But while trying to have this conversation with him, well, you had the Soviet Union try to attack Magneto, but Rogue was in the way. And so, well, she gets hurt by their attack. Now, for Magneto, that is another example that mutants will never be free, that mutants will always be a target for the human race. And so he does use one of the nuclear missiles in the upper atmosphere. And so honestly, the ground level is not seriously damaged, but he did release nuclear radiation in the sky now. But you do have Magneto retreat back to his asteroid to get away from everyone else. Now, Magneto did get hurt from his battle against the X-Men, but also because the nuke that he used. And so once he does get back to the asteroid, you do have Fabian Cortez use his powers to heal up Magneto, which is only one of his many abilities that he actually has. You see, when it comes to Fabian, he has a range of different kinds of powers. Healing is just one of them. Matter of fact, he also has the ability to enhance other mutants' powers to extreme levels. But currently, he's just trying to heal up Magneto. But we kind of see that Fabian is really upset with Magneto being hurt. Now, after Rogue was hit by the Russian planes, she crash landed in Genosha. Now, we had talked about this country before. You see, originally, Genosha was this country in Marvel Comics where they were trying to paint this picture as a perfect country, that if you go there, you never want to leave. But in reality, if you were a mutant, you were a slave. Now, recently, the X-Men were able to begin the process of turning things around in that country, where mutants are no longer slaves, that now they are free and they now have the ability to do whatever they want. Except Rogue had crash land after her conversation with Magneto, but being attacked by the Russian planes. Except when she wakes up, they tell her right now Genosha is being attacked by a group of superpower beings. And we kind of find out that it is the Acolytes. Now, this gives us our first appearance of this group. A group of characters that are going to be Magneto's followers, but also his strike team as well. Now, the reason why they are here is for two different things. First, it's Rogue. They want to see if Rogue is going to join their side, be next to Magneto, and begin the process of changing things. But also, they came here to attack Genosha, because this country, like I said before, was a country full of slaves, mutants who were slaves and being forced to do things for the human race. And so they believe this country should pay for all their past crimes, even though this is a country that's going through a huge change. Now, you have Rogue trying her best to stop them, but you know, there's too many of them. But luckily for her, the X-Men do arrive, and we do get a lot of great pages drawn by Jim Lee when it comes to our heroes fighting against the Acolytes. Now, we're also getting a small tease of the idea that there might be some kind of connection between Wolverine and also Fabian Cortez, but only a small tease, and that is really it. Now, something else I should mention is that some of the Acolytes are actually just regular humans who are being controlled by Fabian's sister Anna Marie to kind of help fill the team out. And so you have our heroes wondering, why in the world are these regular humans helping out this mutant group to attack a supposed mutant hating nation? Either way, you have our heroes go up against the Acolytes, but then Magneto arrives. Now, the last page of the book is where you have Magneto appear. And when he does, he tells everyone to just stop. And everyone does in their tracks. And he says, listen, I'm going to tell you guys right now that these people are under my watch. I will take full responsibility for their actions today. He even says it was not him who has sent the Acolytes down to Earth to attack Genosha. They came here on their own. But I want to say that any punishment that you guys believe they deserve will not be happening at all. Only I, Magneto, can give them the punishment that they actually deserve, because again, I will take full on responsibility for their actions. And also, they came from Asteroid M. And this is where he said Asteroid M is going to be a safe haven for all mutants around the world. If mutants around the world want to come there, they can. And they will be protected by me from the human race. Even the X-Men and Charles Xavier are welcome. And just like that, Magneto has kind of slipped back into the role of a bad guy, but again, not completely, because this is a man who just wants to protect his people. And so, as we dive into X-Men number 2, we kind of see the X-Men continuing to argue with Magneto. Now, this argument is really more the idea of saying, listen, your acolytes have to pay for what they have done to Genosha, to the innocent lives lost in this country. But for Magneto, he's kind of like, why should he? Or why should they? I'm sorry. Because for Magneto, he's like, Genosha had many years of slavery, so many years of slavery on the mutant race. And so what my acolytes did may seem wrong, but for me, it was the right punishment to give to this country. Now, you have Genosha begin to attack back with their magistrate. And so you have Magneto try to defend himself, but to also take down the magistrate as well. Now, you have the X-Men fighting against the acolytes, but I want to focus on Fabian Cortez going up against Psylocke because, like I said earlier, Fabian has the ability to enhance people's powers to extreme levels. And so when he is able to touch Psylocke, he is able to take her powers to extreme levels, where she is now able to read all the minds on the entire island, in the entire country. And for Psylocke, she's not a powerful psychic like Jean Grey or Charles Xavier, but she's still up there. But also, this is just too much for her to handle on her own. Now we jump over to Nick Fury, who's having a meeting with some of the world leaders, and the world is watching what's happening in Genosha. They're watching what Magneto is doing over there. He is destroying the entire country. And so you have Genosha freaking out because thanks to the whole extension agenda where they almost went to war against America, but also show what they did to the mutant race, there were a lot of restrictions put down on Genosha by other countries. So they don't have the right resources to actually fight back against Magneto. They're calling out for help. But while they're doing that, you have these world leaders technically tell Nick Fury that it may be time to go ahead and use the Magneto protocol. I want to shift our focus back on Psylocke because, like I said, she's hearing all the minds of every single person in this country. And right now, there is a lot of hatred towards the mutant race. Now, Beast is able to get some of the crowd away from her. And you have Fabian very excited in what he was actually able to do to Psylocke. But then you have Gambit being able to knock him out. Now, for Magneto, enough is enough. He hates the idea of seeing the mutant race fighting against each other, the acolytes and him fighting against the X-Men. To him, the mutant race should be coming together and going after the human race, or going after their enemies. But as we go back to the base of the X-Men, we see Charles Xavier, Banshee, and Forge just watching and seeing what is happening over in Genosha. And for Forge and Banshee and Charles Xavier, they do know that some of the countries are actually talking about using the Magneto protocols. But the problem is Forge has no idea what those actually are. Now, for Charles Xavier, he's kind of wondering where Moira McTaggart is at, because at this point in time, her and Banshee and Forge were staying with the X-Men. And so you have Banshee say, hey, I don't know. She's not in the secure area of the school, so I should go find her. But you have Charles say, no, I'll go find her because I need to talk to her. Now, for Banshee and Forge, they're kind of worried of Charles Xavier leaving the secured area, but he wants to talk to Moira McTaggart. But getting back over to the battle with the X-Men, they're still battling against Magneto. Now, while battling against Magneto, we cannot forget that Psylocke had her powers enhanced. And so with her powers now being brought up to an all-new high of level, she was able to use her psychic knife on the mind of Magneto. Now, Magneto is a well-trained mutant. He knows how to protect his mind from different kinds of psychic attacks. Now, even though it is a powerful one, she can't completely bring him down. Now, before Rogue is able to give out the knockout punch, well, unfortunately, the entire X-Men team are turned to chrome statues by another acolyte that had arrived a tad bit too late. An acolyte going by the name Chrome. And of course, their ability is to turn people or objects into chrome. And so with the X-Men now being statues, you didn't have Magneto say, you know what, let's go ahead and bring them over to Asteroid M, where I will decide what should be their punishment for going against us and our goals. Now, once you have Magneto being able to get back over to Asteroid M, we do learn that Fabian Cortez, while he was healing up Magneto, he found something wrong with the DNA code of Magneto. Like, there was a part of genetics that was actually engineered by someone else. And the question is, how is that possible? How was somebody able to change a part of Magneto's DNA? But apparently he does know where it could have came from. Now, we also learned that Russia had just launched a weapon into space, a plasma cannon. And this plasma cannon would have usually scared America, but now America is cheering on Russia, because right now they're going to use that weapon against Magneto. But now you have Magneto heading over to the school of Charles Xavier and also Mohamed Tagger. Now this is Magneto questioning Charles Xavier, questioning Mohamed Tagger, because he believes that they had done something to his genetics. And so he has taken them into space so that they have nowhere to run. But this is Magneto saying, I know that one of you guys did something to my genetics, did something to my DNA. Now for Charles, he has no idea what Magneto is talking about, but Mohamed Tagger, yeah, she does. You see, there was a point in time where Magneto was a baby. Yeah, you heard that right. We had a baby Magneto, but he was then turned back into an adult by Eric the Red. But in that short period of time where he was a baby, he was staying with Mohamed Tagger, which means it had to be her. She did something to him. And so you have Magneto take Charles and Mohamed Tagger over to Asteroid M so that she's able to explain what she had done to Magneto in the past. You see, we do learn that when Mohamed Tagger had Magneto when he was a baby, she kind of realized that there was something wrong with his nervous system. And so she felt like if she was able to alter it or fix it, then most likely when he would grow up, he would not become a villain once again. Now, as we all know, when it came to Eric the Red, he was able to age up Magneto back into an adult. But as we saw over time, Magneto began to become a good guy, a leader of the X-Men, a teacher for the New Mutants. And so you had Mohamed Tagger believe at first that what she did actually worked. But the only reason why she did that to Magneto because she was hoping to find a way to save her son. Now for Magneto, he now feels like all the moves he made over a short period of time in X-Men comics were no longer his own moves. That technically they were the moves of Mohamed Tagger because she changed him. She altered him. And so because of that, he said, listen, you are now going to work for me. You're going to help me make the X-Men follow my commands, follow my orders, and you better not tell me no, because if you try to tell me no, I will kill you. And so unfortunately, Mohamed Tagger has no choice but to go ahead and help out Magneto to make Cyclops' team follow his commands. But then we get a small glimpse of Omega Red, and this is really big because you have the general of the Soviet Union handing over this container that contains Omega Red, a character we're going to see in our next X-Men video. But while you have him handing over this container, we see him handing it over to Matsuo. Now, Matsuo is actually a member of the Hand, a ninja organization. And by this point in Marvel Comics, he's one of their higher up leaders. But apparently, he wanted Omega Red for some unknown reason. And now he has it. He tells his guys to go ahead and kill off the general as he leaves with the container containing Omega Red. But now we have to jump over to the gold team. Now the gold team, they're running a simulation trying to figure out how are they going to save the blue team and Charles Xavier. But while they are doing that, they didn't get a message from Nick Fury. Now this is Nick saying, hey guys, I want to tell you that the Soviet Union had launched a weapon that's basically a plasma cannon, and it has the ability to punch a hole into a planet. They plan on using that cannon on Magneto's asteroid M, which means if it does hit the asteroid, everyone on that asteroid M base is going to die, including the blue team and Charles Xavier. So now the gold team has to hurry up and find a way to save their friends before asteroid M gets blown out of space. And so getting into the third chapter for today's video, we do see, well, the X-Men heading over to Asteroid M. Now, this is the gold team, and they're in a spaceship that's trying to not be detected by Magneto or any of his defenses at all. But we can see our heroes are kind of wondering, how in the world are they going to be able to pull something off like this? But the thing is, they have to at least try to save their teammates, to save Charles Xavier. But while they're doing that, back on the ground, you have Nick Fury talking to the different leaders who are involved with the whole Magneto protocol. And this is Nick kind of wondering, what in the world are you guys doing? Like, think about this. What if your plasma cannon does not actually destroy the asteroid? What if the asteroid just get pushed right into the Earth and then bang, you would cause severe damage to our planet? But for these leaders, they're kind of like, hey, we have to take a chance here. We have to try and see if we are able to wipe out Magneto's asteroid. Almost said aircraft there. Now we do see Fabian Cortez kind of questioning Magneto on why haven't he tried to have Charles Xavier also be under his control like the blue team is. But you have Magneto say, I don't want to have Charles under my control. I want to see him broken. I want to show him what I am able to do and what I did to his dream, but also to his students. Now you have Moira McTaggart once again try to talk back to Magneto by saying, listen, Charles is innocent and so is his X-Men team. The only person that you should be mad at right now is me. I was the one who was playing with your genetics. Now Magneto knows that, but he does not care. But he does get very upset that she had decided to raise her voice at him. But the problem is, in the middle of him yelling, he begins to feel weak once again. Now, there is something I did forget to mention in this story, that every once in a while, Magneto needs Fabian to heal him up. But the problem is, Fabian is not properly healing Magneto. Like, yes, he is, but he's also doing harm to Magneto's body as well. And he's doing it on purpose. Now, the reason why is not told to us until the very end of this book. But for Moira McTaggart, she realized that Fabian is helping Magneto, but also hurting Magneto. But now we are able to pick up with the blue team. Now, when we do, we see the blue team is completely under the control of Magneto, thanks to Moira McTaggart. And so you have the blue team just kind of hanging out. But we can also see that different members of the team are beginning to remember their past lives, but it's kind of hard for them to remember completely. And really, our first example is Rogue, who's kind of like, wait a second, something is wrong here. Now, you have the other team, the gold team for X-Men, getting close to Asteroid M. And Moira McTaggart, she saw them coming, even though they're trying their best to hide from Asteroid M and Magneto's detections. They're still being seen by Moira McTaggart. And Wolverine realized that she knows that somebody is coming very soon. And most likely, it's the other X-Men team. And so for Wolverine, he said, you know what? It's time for us to get ready to host for our visitors. Now, once you have the gold team being able to get onto Asteroid M, they do have to fight against the other X-Men team. Now, this fight is very short-lived. Like, yes, we do get a few cool pages where you have Jim Lee showing us his work on all these different X-Men characters, but you didn't have the blue team remember who they are and what they are, that they are the X-Men. They're not with Magneto at all. And so they once again realize that they're on the wrong side and they rejoin the gold team. Now, as soon as they do that, you have Magneto appear. Now, you do have Magneto once again try to make a statement. The whole idea of he was just only trying to help out the mutant kind, trying to get back at the human race for what they have done to their people. But then you have Magneto fall to the ground where he feels like something is wrong with him. And so you have Moira Taggart say, yes, there is something wrong with you. But first, let me explain. You see, I did alter your genetics. I did change your DNA, but it could only work if you did not use your powers. And as we know, you did, which means all that time where you were the headmaster of Charles Xavier School, where you were the teacher for the New Mutants, that was you. That was your choices. It wasn't like I completely changed you and forced you into that role. That was all you, my dude. But she also says Fabian Cortez has been using you. He only heals you up to a certain point where then you require him more often because he was waiting for the right moment to make you become a martyr. You see, once you are dead, the mutant race will then rally around your death. And then they'll try to go to war with the human race. He has set everything up when it comes to Russia and their plasma cannon, you and everyone else around here. It was all Fabian Cortez. And once you have everyone realize that, homeboy dipped out. He is already on escape pod going back to Earth. And so, yeah, it was Fabian Cortez. In the plasma cannon, it does fire, and it does hit Asteroid M, and it does seem like it's going to explode. Now, you have the X-Men being able to get on their ship to head back to Earth, but Magneto and his acolytes, minus Fabian Cortez, they stay behind. They want to die on Asteroid M. And the book kind of ends with Asteroid M blowing up, and having us wondering if Magneto and his acolytes had officially died. But either way, the X-Men can now head back home to Earth. And this begins the new era of X-Men comics. But unfortunately, the new era goes on without Chris Claremont, because this was the last book he wrote for X-Men comics at this point in time in Marvel Comics. He left Marvel completely. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.